favourite 90s action movies. Hello there, and welcome to a new video talking about a subject I haven't really looked into before, mainly my love for action movies. Now everyone knows that big manly macho men love action movies, and since you all know what a big manly macho man I am, shut up, I thought it was time I took a look at these. The most I've done on this channel before is kind of a look at some of the movies of Roger Moore and Arnold Schwarzenegger, and that's about it. And it just seems a bit odd, really, because I've always loved action movies, especially the golden age of action movies, which was, of course, the 80s and the 90s. This time around, I thought I'd look at some favourite 90s action movies, avoiding some of the perhaps more obvious ones, in which case I'm pretty much talking about Terminator 2 and True Lies. I mean, any action movie fan should know and love Terminator 2 and True Lies. Not only are they two of the best Arnie movies, they're just two of the best action movies of all time, period. So what I want to do with this one is take a look at perhaps some of the more underrated ones. I mean, obviously, underrated, one man's underrated is another man's overrated or another man's favourite, but just ones that are perhaps not as famous as the obvious ones. I mean, there are even a couple of Arnie movies that I would say would fall into that category from the 90s, from the late 90s, like Eraser and End of Days. Now, even at the time, I wasn't really that impressed by Eraser or End of Days. I guess, I was comparing them to some of the earlier Arnie movies, not just T2 and True Lies, but the Terminator and Predator. And I thought they kind of fell short. But I didn't watch them again for a really, really long time. But it's been like a few years ago I watched Eraser and End of Days, and I actually loved both of them. I mean, I don't know whether it was just, maybe I wasn't in the mood back then, or I was unfairly comparing them, or maybe it's just that they look great next to some of the crap we get these days. I mean, maybe that's it. But yeah, I thought they were both really, really, really enjoyable. But anyway, I've talked about those before, so let's move on to some ones that I haven't talked about once before. Broken Arrow is a really, really great 90s action movie. John Travolta and Christian Slater are military pilots who take a nuclear-capable aircraft for a test flight when Travolta goes rogue, ejecting Slater and crashing the craft with the intention of stealing the nukes and then selling them back to the US government for lots and lots and lots of money. With the government trying to figure out what's going on, Slater is left with no option but to try and stop Travolta and his band of mercenaries, aided only by a feisty park ranger in the form of the very nice Samantha Mathis. This is just so much fun. I mean, John Travolta is chewing the scenery thoroughly entertainingly as the utterly loony villain, and Christian Slater and Samantha Mathis make for very likeable heroes. And it's just got tons of great stunts and great action sequences. This is another one that I watched in the last few years, having not seen it for a really long time, and I thought it was an absolute hoot. I give Broken Arrow a straight A. Hard Rain is another kind of underrated Christian Slater action movie. I'm not sure I'd call it quite up there with Broken Arrow, but it's still pretty good. Slater is a security van driver whose truck gets hijacked by a band of crooks just as the small town that they're all in is hit by a massive flood. Now, there's a great supporting cast, including Morgan Freeman, Minnie Driver, and Randy Quaid. And this is a really entertaining late 90s action flicks that mixes kind of a heist thriller with a disaster movie. And it's really entertaining. I'd give Hard Rain a solid B+. Now, Tombstone. Does Tombstone count as an action movie? I mean, I know it's a western, but it's also kind of an action movie. I'm including it anyway, so. Legendary lawman Wyatt Earp arrives in Tombstone with his older and younger brother and their wives, but he has long since retired from the law profession and is basically just in town to try and make a buck, only to find the place is under the control of a vicious criminal gang known as the Cowboys. Still, all he wants to do is keep his head down, make some good money, and then probably just get out of there. But circumstances soon begin to conspire to make that impossible, and a showdown inevitable. Kurt Russell and Val Kilmer, giving probably his best performance as Doc Holliday, lead a fabulous supporting cast including Michael Biehn, Bill Paxton, Sam Elliott, Dana Delaney, Powers Booth, Terry O'Quinn, and more, in a really entertaining movie. I mean, I'm not even really into westerns in general, to be honest. They're just not really my kind of genre. But this is a really, really entertaining action flick. I give Tombstone another strong B+. Another 90s action movie I would say is a little bit underrated is Lethal Weapon 3. Now, Lethal Weapon 3 kind of gets a bit of stick, and I can kind of see why, because it's not up there with the first two. Riggs and Murtaugh are back, this time up against a corrupt former cop who's stealing deadly weapons and putting them back on the streets. Now, this series is, of course, iconic, and I do agree that Lethal Weapon 3 is not on the same level as the first two, as it does lack a certain kind of intensity. The villain doesn't really live up to the main bad guys in the first two either, but it's still full of some really good action sequences and some really big laughs, and Rene Russo is a welcome addition as a badass internal affairs officer who strikes up some romantic sparks with Riggs. I mean, it's still good fun, and I'd say it's better than the fourth one, so yeah, I'd give Lethal Weapon 3 a B+ too. Now, another kind of underrated late 90s action movie, it's more of a disaster movie, but it's still kind of an action movie, that I had not seen for a really long time again, is Dantes Peak. A volcanologist arrives in the small town of Dantes Peak, which is an idyllic community nestled at the foot of a long-dormant volcano, and he soon becomes convinced that the volcano is going to wake up in spectacular fashion. Pierce Brosnan and Terminator icon Linda Hamilton star in this. This was kind of one of a variety of mini revivals of the disaster movie genre in the late 90s that kind of took advantage of the then new CGI effects. Ironically, it kind of actually feels really old school now, because there's still enough kind of old-fashioned movie craftsmanship in here that it still feels very detached from today's kind of non-stop CGI fests. Again, I saw this, I hadn't seen it in like 20 years, and I really, really enjoyed it. Another B+ from me. I don't know why I'm rating these, because let's face it, these are my favourite 90s action movies, so I'm not going to give any of them a bad score, am I? Oh well. The next one I want to talk about is Hard Target. Jean-Claude Van Damme. I am not a fan of Jean-Claude Van Damme, but this is absolutely his best flick. Now, in this, he's an army vet who tries to help a young woman, played by Yancy Butler, to track down her apparently homeless veteran father, only to get sucked into the middle of a conspiracy involving ruthless mercenaries who are using homeless veterans as prey for wealthy clients to track and kill in literal manhunts. Now, this is an early 90s action thriller that is another of those that I hadn't seen at least since the early 2000s, and I had almost forgotten what an awesome action flick this actually is. It's got some quality scenery-chewing villainy from the great Lance Henriksen, and the climax is utterly freaking insane. Hard Target is a really, really great movie, and I would give it a strong A-. Another one, and this is basically about, this seems to be about movies I haven't seen for ages until recently, is Con Air. Sent to prison after killing a drunken thug in a fight, former US Ranger Nicolas Cage is finally being released, but the US Marshal flight that's meant to be his flight to freedom is hijacked by a highly dangerous group of other prisoners, and he finds himself caught between them and the authorities. Now, this was another one I didn't like, kind of like End of Days or Eraser. I didn't really think much to it at the cinema. I don't know why. I don't know. Again, was I just not in the mood or something? Or was it? I don't know. And I did not see it again for a really, really long time, up until I think it was late 2018 when I bought it cheap on Blu-ray. You know, I was kind of sweeping up old 90s movies, and I thought I might as well give it a second chance. Now, it is ludicrously overblown, and maybe that's why I didn't like it then. But honestly, this time I had an absolute blast with it. It's really, really, I mean, it's dumb fun, but it is fun. And it's got a fantastic cast, including John Cusack, John Malkovich, Cole Meany from Star Trek DS9, Ving Rhames, and Steve Buscemi. Buscemi? How do you say that? I don't know. I always said Buscemi. This is really, really great fun. I'm giving this an A minus, actually. I was just really surprised how much I enjoyed it. I mean, I'm not sure if this one is underrated. People seem to talk about it quite fondly, but I think it was more, and it was underrated by me in a way, because I never thought much to it, and I didn't watch it again for so long. But yeah, it was great. Now, the last one I really want to talk about on here, again, I think it's underrated because it didn't do very well at the box office. Though I have seen a lot of people talking very fondly about it, and so they should, because it's never been underrated by me. I loved it when I saw it in the late 90s. It's one that I always reach for every few years, and I watched it like late November last year, and that is The Long Kiss Goodnight. Gina Davis is a primary school teacher and mother who's also an amnesiac with no memory of her life beyond 8 years earlier, which is an utter mystery to her. But her past is about to catch up with her, and it's not at all what anybody would expect. Now, this is a classic action film. It's just so much freaking fun. It's got some fantastic dialogue. Samuel L. Jackson's in it in fine form. It's truly spectacular action. It's actually a great Christmas movie as well. I mean, I had forgotten how Christmassy it actually is. If I'd realized, I probably would have waited a few weeks and watched it closer to Christmas. But yeah, it's got a great Christmas atmosphere to it as well. If you want a Christmas movie to change things up from, Die Hard or Lethal Weapon, you have got to reach for The Long Kiss Goodnight. I'm giving The Long Kiss Goodnight a straight A, and frankly, it's pretty close to an A+ in my opinion. Anyway, that's about it for this week. Maybe I'll do another movie talking about some underrated 80s action movies. We'll see. Bye for now.